The biggest mistakes in life often happen when people believe they already know the truth before they ever hear the story. On a peaceful morning in Arlington, Virginia, the sound of a sport bike moving through the streets belonged to a woman who had spent years carrying one of the greatest responsibilities in the country. But to everyone watching from the outside, she looked like anyone else. She was simply a rider enjoying a quiet moment. Her name was Olivia Bennett, and she had learned that the most important parts of a person are often the ones nobody can see. For most people, a Sunday morning meant rest, but for Olivia, it meant a rare opportunity to step away from the pressure of her professional life. During the week, she sat inside a federal courtroom where every decision required patience, knowledge, and a deep understanding of fairness. As a federal judge, she carried the responsibility of listening to difficult cases and making decisions that could affect people's futures. But outside the courtroom, Olivia valued something simple: freedom, peace, a few hours where she could just be herself. That was why she chose her sport bike. It was not about showing status. It was not about gaining attention. It was about enjoying a personal moment after years of dedication and service. Wearing protective riding gear and moving through familiar roads, Olivia looked nothing like the image many people expected from someone with her position. There was no courtroom, no official title, no sign that she was someone whose decisions carried significant authority. There was only a woman on a motorcycle, and sometimes that is where misunderstandings begin. Officer Ryan Whitmore was working patrol that morning when he noticed Olivia on the road. He had years of experience in law enforcement, and he believed that experience helped him recognize situations that needed attention. Over time, he had learned to observe details quickly. But there was something even experience could not reveal: person's entire story. Ryan did not know that the rider in front of him had spent years studying the law. He did not know that she had built a career around protecting fairness and making careful decisions. He did not know that the person he was about to question represented the very principles he was expected to uphold. All he saw was what appeared in front of him: a motorcycle, a rider he did not recognize, a situation he wanted to understand. Olivia noticed the attention but remained calm. She had spent her life in environments where patience mattered more than emotion. She understood that people often react to what they see before they understand what they do not see. She believed that the truth did not need to be forced. It only needed the opportunity to appear. As the morning continued, neither of them realized that this ordinary encounter would become a moment of reflection, discovery, and change. Ryan believed he was looking into the story of a motorcycle rider. He had no idea that the person standing before him was someone whose entire career was built on discovering the truth behind every story. The truth about a person is rarely found in the first few seconds of an encounter. Sometimes, it takes patience, understanding, and a willingness to look beyond what is immediately visible. On that quiet morning in Arlington, Virginia, Olivia Bennett remained calm as Officer Ryan Whitmore approached her. To Ryan, this was another moment during his patrol. To Olivia, it was another reminder that every person deserves to be understood before being judged. Ryan had spent years working in law enforcement. He believed in responsibility, procedures, and protecting the community. His experience had taught him to pay attention to details and notice situations that seemed unusual. But experience could only show him what was happening on the surface. It could not reveal the years of dedication, discipline, and service hidden behind a person's appearance. Olivia answered Ryan's questions respectfully. She did not become defensive. She did not try to make the situation about her position or career. She simply provided the information requested and allowed the process to continue. That decision was important because Olivia believed something that had guided her throughout her entire legal career. Fairness should not depend on knowing someone's title. A person should not receive respect only after others discover their accomplishments. Respect should exist from the beginning. Ryan noticed something different about Olivia's attitude. Many people reacted emotionally when questioned, but she remained composed. Her calm response made him wonder if there was more to the situation than he initially understood. He still did not know who she was, but he began to recognize that his first impression might not tell the complete story. Olivia understood that moments like this revealed more than just information about one person. They revealed how people approached uncertainty. She had spent years inside courtrooms where every side of a story mattered. She knew that a single detail could change an entire understanding of a situation. That same principle applied outside the courtroom as well. Every person carried experiences, challenges, and achievements that were invisible to strangers. The sport bike, the riding gear, and the quiet morning did not define Olivia. They were only small pieces of a much larger story. As the conversation continued, Ryan followed the process he believed was necessary. He had no reason to know that the woman standing in front of him was someone who understood the law at the highest level. He did not know that she had spent her career examining facts, listening carefully, and making decisions based on fairness. He only knew the information available at that moment. Nearby, the world continued moving as usual. People passed by without realizing that a simple encounter was slowly becoming something much bigger. They saw a police officer speaking with a motorcycle rider, but they did not see the hidden story behind it. They did not see the federal judge who had dedicated her life to justice. They did not see the officer who was about to learn an important lesson about perception and responsibility. Ryan believed he was evaluating a situation in front of him. He did not realize that the situation was also revealing something about the way people judge what they do not yet understand. The most important moments in life are not always the dramatic ones. Sometimes they are the quiet moments, when people make choices that reveal who they truly are. On that morning in Arlington, Virginia, Olivia Bennett and Officer Ryan Whitmore continued an encounter that neither of them expected would become a lesson about perception, fairness, and the importance of understanding the complete truth. Ryan continued asking questions because he believed he was doing his job. He wanted to understand the situation in front of him and make sure everything was clear. From his perspective, he was following the responsibilities that came with wearing a badge. But what he did not know was that the person answering his questions had spent years inside courtrooms studying the very principles that guided his work. Olivia remained patient throughout the conversation. She understood that Ryan was seeing only a small part of a much larger story. She had experienced many moments in her career where people formed opinions before hearing all the facts. As a federal judge, she had seen how important it was to slow down, listen carefully, and avoid making decisions based on incomplete information. Those lessons were not only for the courtroom. They were lessons that applied to everyday life. Ryan noticed that Olivia carried herself differently. There was a confidence in her voice and a calmness in her responses that made the situation feel different from what he expected. He could not explain it yet, but something about the encounter challenged his original assumptions. The person he thought he understood was proving to be far more complex than he imagined. Meanwhile, Olivia continued observing the situation without revealing her position. She was not trying to create a moment of embarrassment or use her career to change the outcome. She wanted something much more meaningful. She wanted to see whether fairness existed before recognition. Because in her years serving the justice system, she had learned that true fairness was not about how people treated those with influence. It was about how they treated those whose stories they did not know. The morning continued quietly around them. Cars moved through the streets, people went about their daily routines, and most had no idea that an ordinary interaction was becoming a powerful reflection on human judgment. To anyone watching from a distance, it looked like a simple conversation between a police officer and a motorcycle rider. But beneath the surface, there was a deeper question taking shape. Would people still act the same way if they knew the full story of the person standing before them? Ryan did not have the answer yet. He only had the information available at that moment. He did not know about Olivia's years of legal service. He did not know about the decisions she had made from the bench or the responsibility she carried every day. He only saw the person in front of him. And that was exactly what made this moment so important. Because every person, no matter their appearance, profession, or background, carries a story that cannot be seen immediately. Olivia knew the truth would eventually come forward. She did not need to force it. She believed that facts had their own power. And as the encounter continued, the distance between assumption and reality slowly began to disappear. The moment when truth finally appears is often the moment when people realize how little they knew before. In Arlington, Virginia, the quiet conversation between Olivia Bennett and Officer Ryan Whitmore continued, but neither of them understood that the most unexpected detail was still waiting to be revealed. Ryan continued reviewing the information available to him, believing he was handling a normal situation. He had no reason to know that the woman standing in front of him had spent years inside federal courtrooms, making decisions based on evidence, fairness, and careful consideration. To him, Olivia was simply a rider on a sport bike. To reality, she was someone who represented the very principles he was expected to protect. Olivia remained composed because she understood something important about moments like this. The truth did not need to arrive with anger or confrontation. It only needed the right moment to be recognized. She had built her career around patience, and she knew that assumptions could change when more information became available. Ryan noticed that Olivia's confidence and calm behavior were unusual. The conversation did not unfold the way he expected. There was no panic, no attempt to avoid questions, and no effort to use influence. Instead, there was only cooperation and patience. That made him look at the situation differently. He began to wonder if his first impression had been incomplete. As the verification process continued, a few details started connecting in ways Ryan did not expect. Information that seemed ordinary at first began revealing a much larger story. The name connected to the rider was not unfamiliar because it belonged to someone unknown. It belonged to someone respected throughout the legal community. Someone whose career was built around understanding people, reviewing facts, and searching for the truth. The realization came quietly. There was no dramatic announcement. There was simply a moment when the information changed everything. Ryan learned that Olivia Bennett was not just a motorcycle rider passing through Arlington. She was a federal judge. The discovery created a silence that carried more meaning than any argument could have. The person he had been trying to understand was someone who had spent her entire professional life studying the same concepts of fairness and responsibility that guided his own work. But Olivia did not use the moment to criticize him. She did not use her position to demand special treatment. Instead, she remained exactly who she had been from the beginning: calm, respectful, and focused on the principle that mattered most. Everyone deserves to be treated fairly before anyone knows their achievements. Ryan reflected on the situation differently now. He realized that a title should not be the reason someone receives respect. A title should simply reveal something that was already there. Olivia's importance did not come from being a federal judge. Her importance came from the values she carried long before anyone knew her name. That morning, Ryan thought he was evaluating a situation involving a stranger. Instead, he found himself facing a lesson about perception, responsibility, and the danger of believing that the first version of a story is always the complete one. The truth had finally been revealed, but the most important part of the encounter was not the moment when Ryan Whitmore discovered Olivia Bennett's position. It was the realization that came afterward. A title could explain who someone was, but it could never define why they deserved respect. That lesson stayed with Ryan long after the morning in Arlington, Virginia, had passed. He thought about the conversation again and again. He remembered the details he had noticed first: the motorcycle, the riding gear, the situation that seemed ordinary at a glance. But now he understood that he had only seen the smallest piece of a much larger story. Olivia Bennett had spent years inside courtrooms where every decision required patience and fairness. She knew that people often arrived with incomplete information, and she knew how dangerous it could be when assumptions replaced understanding. That was why she handled the encounter the way she did. She did not reveal her position to change the outcome. She did not want respect because of her career. She wanted the same respect that every person deserved before anyone knew her accomplishments. For Olivia, the situation represented something much bigger than herself. She understood that many people moved through life carrying stories that remained invisible to others. A person could have years of experience, countless achievements, and a lifetime of dedication, yet still be judged by a single moment someone else observed. That was why she believed fairness had to come first. Ryan began looking at his own role differently. He had always understood that wearing a badge meant responsibility, but now he saw that responsibility in a deeper way. Authority was not only about making decisions. It was about making sure those decisions were guided by understanding. The strongest officers were not the ones who assumed they knew everything. They were the ones willing to recognize when there was more to learn. The encounter also caught the attention of Detective Emily Parker, who reviewed the details after hearing about what happened. Emily understood that situations like this required careful attention. She did not want to focus only on one person or one moment. She wanted to understand the larger picture. As she examined the information, she began asking questions about how first impressions influenced decisions and whether similar situations had occurred before. Olivia agreed to share her perspective because she believed meaningful change came from honest reflection. She was not interested in creating embarrassment or blame. She wanted people to understand that justice was strongest when it protected everyone, not only those whose identities were immediately recognized. The story of a federal judge on a sport bike became a reminder that appearances could hide incredible journeys. Ryan had believed he was meeting someone he needed to evaluate. Instead, he met someone who taught him a lesson about evaluation itself. The person standing before him had not changed when he learned her identity. She had been patient, respectful, and composed from the beginning. Only his understanding had changed. And that was the moment the real lesson became clear. People should not receive fairness because of who they are. They should receive fairness because they are human. The encounter between Olivia Bennett and Officer Ryan Whitmore had ended, but the questions it created were only beginning. In Arlington, Virginia, what appeared to be a simple moment on a quiet street had become a reminder that every decision made by people in positions of responsibility could have a deeper impact than they realized. Detective Emily Parker continued reviewing the details because she understood that the purpose of an investigation was not to search for someone to blame. It was to understand what happened and determine what could be learned from it. Emily approached the situation carefully. She knew that one conversation could reveal important information, but she also knew that meaningful conclusions required patience and facts. As she examined the circumstances, she noticed something that stood out. The situation was not only about Olivia Bennett or Officer Ryan Whitmore. It was about how quickly people could form opinions when they only had a small amount of information. Throughout her career, Olivia had seen similar challenges inside courtrooms. She had watched people make decisions based on incomplete stories, only to discover later that reality was far more complicated. That experience shaped the way she handled the encounter. She did not focus on proving that she was important. She focused on showing why fairness mattered. Emily recognized that difference. The most powerful part of the situation was not that Olivia was a federal judge. The most powerful part was that she deserved respectful treatment even if nobody ever discovered her title. That understanding became the center of the review. Ryan also continued reflecting on what happened. He thought about the moment before he knew Olivia's identity and the moment after. The facts had not changed. Olivia had not changed. The only thing that changed was his understanding of who she was. That realization stayed with him. He began to recognize that every person he encountered had a story that could not be seen immediately. A person's clothing, vehicle, or appearance could never reveal the full measure of their character. As Emily continued looking deeper, she started noticing concerns that extended beyond one interaction. She found that situations involving quick assumptions deserved more attention because small decisions could influence how people experienced authority. The goal was not to create conflict. The goal was to create awareness and encourage better judgment in the future. Olivia supported the process because she believed accountability was not about punishment. It was about improvement. A stronger system was one where people could learn from difficult moments and create better outcomes for everyone. The morning ride that began as a private moment had now become a conversation about responsibility and trust. Ryan had expected to evaluate a situation. Instead, the situation had encouraged him to evaluate himself. Emily had expected to review an encounter. Instead, she discovered a larger opportunity to examine how people make decisions. And Olivia, the person at the center of everything, continued to show the same patience she had shown from the beginning. She did not need a title to prove her worth. She did not need recognition to deserve respect. The truth had revealed who she was, but the lesson was about something much bigger. It was about understanding that every person carries a story, and justice begins when people choose to listen before they judge. The investigation continued to move forward, but the most important discoveries were not found in documents or official reports. They were found in the moments when people were willing to look honestly at their own decisions. In Arlington, Virginia, Detective Emily Parker continued reviewing the details surrounding Olivia Bennett's encounter with Officer Ryan Whitmore. She understood that the situation represented something larger than one conversation between two people. It represented a question that every organization built on public trust had to answer. How do people make decisions when they do not know the full story? Emily carefully examined the information available, looking for patterns and understanding the circumstances that shaped the encounter. She did not approach the review with the intention of creating a simple answer. Real situations were rarely simple. They were built from choices, assumptions, and moments where people either listened or rushed to conclusions. Olivia remained focused on the same principle that had guided her throughout her career. Justice was strongest when it was applied consistently, not only when people recognized the person standing in front of them. She knew that her position as a federal judge changed how people viewed the situation after the truth was revealed, but she also knew that the deeper lesson existed before anyone knew her title. Respect should not depend on status. Fairness should not depend on reputation. Ryan began having conversations about the experience and thinking about how it changed his perspective. He did not view the moment as a reason to become defensive. Instead, he saw it as an opportunity to improve. He understood that responsibility required more than following procedures. It required awareness of how decisions affected others. A person wearing a badge represented authority, but authority was meaningful only when it was guided by fairness and understanding. As Emily continued her review, she discovered that the encounter raised important questions about training, communication, and the way assumptions could influence decisions. These questions were not about one individual. They were about creating a stronger environment where people could recognize the importance of patience and careful judgment. Olivia supported that approach because she believed meaningful change came from learning. She had spent her legal career believing that the purpose of justice was not simply to identify mistakes. The purpose was to understand them and create better paths forward. The story continued gaining attention, but Olivia avoided making herself the center of it. She did not want people to focus only on the surprise of discovering that the motorcycle rider was a federal judge. She wanted them to remember the reason the moment mattered. A person's worth should never depend on whether others know their achievements. The investigation became a reflection of something many people experience in everyday life. Everyone has moments when they are seen before they are understood. Everyone carries parts of their story that remain invisible to strangers. Ryan once believed he was simply evaluating a situation in front of him. Now he understood that every situation involved people with experiences, backgrounds, and histories that could not be immediately recognized. Emily saw the same lesson through the investigation. The strongest systems were not those that never faced difficult questions. They were the ones willing to ask those questions and grow from the answers. And Olivia continued proving that true authority was not about demanding recognition. It was about showing the values that deserved recognition all along. The truth had already changed the way people viewed the encounter, but the deeper impact came from what happened after the discovery. In Arlington, Virginia, the focus was no longer only on what happened that morning. It was now about what people could learn from it and how trust could be strengthened moving forward. Detective Emily Parker continued working through the details, knowing that real progress required more than simply identifying what went wrong. It required understanding why certain decisions were made and how better choices could be encouraged in the future. Emily knew that systems were created by people, and people were capable of learning, improving, and changing. That belief guided her approach. She did not see the investigation as a search for someone to blame. She saw it as an opportunity to understand the importance of fairness and responsibility. Olivia Bennett followed the developments carefully. As a federal judge, she had spent years watching how decisions affected real people. She understood that accountability was not about creating shame. It was about making sure lessons were remembered and that future situations were handled with greater awareness. She continued to emphasize that the most important part of the experience was not her position. Her title only became known after the situation unfolded. The true lesson existed before that moment. Every person deserved to be treated with respect, regardless of whether others knew their background, career, or achievements. Ryan Whitmore also continued reflecting on the encounter. The experience had changed the way he approached his role. He began to understand that responsibility was not only about knowing the rules. It was about understanding the people affected by those rules. Every interaction carried a human story, and every person deserved to be seen as more than a first impression. The badge he wore represented public trust, and he realized that trust was protected through patience, fairness, and humility. As Emily reviewed the broader situation, she noticed that conversations about improvement were beginning. People started asking important questions about communication, judgment, and the value of slowing down before reaching conclusions. These conversations were not easy, but they were necessary. Growth rarely came from pretending problems did not exist. It came from having the courage to examine them honestly. Olivia never viewed the experience as a personal victory. She viewed it as a reminder of something she had always believed. Justice was not about one person proving another person wrong. Justice was about creating a world where truth had the opportunity to be heard. The story of a federal judge riding a sport bike became meaningful because it showed something everyone could understand. A person's appearance could never reveal the full depth of their character. A quiet moment on an ordinary street could contain a lesson that lasted far beyond that day. Ryan once believed he was simply observing a situation. Now he understood that every person he encountered represented a story he had not yet discovered. Emily saw that the greatest strength of any system was the willingness to improve when questions appeared. And Olivia continued forward, knowing that the most powerful form of justice was not demanding recognition. It was ensuring that everyone received fairness before recognition was ever needed. The morning ride through Arlington, Virginia, had started as an ordinary moment of peace, but it became a reminder that every person carries a story that cannot be understood at first glance. As time passed, Olivia Bennett returned to the responsibilities that had defined her life for years. Inside the federal courtroom, she continued doing the work she had always done, listening carefully, examining facts, and searching for fairness in every decision. The experience on the road did not change who she was. It only revealed a lesson that had always been important to her. A person's value should never depend on whether others recognize their achievements. Respect should exist before introductions, before titles, and before anyone knows what someone has accomplished. Officer Ryan Whitmore also carried the memory of that day with him. The encounter changed the way he viewed his role and the people he met while serving the community. He understood that every person had a story beyond what could be seen in a single moment. The motorcycle, the clothing, and the circumstances of a situation could never reveal the full character of the person standing in front of him. Ryan learned that true responsibility was not only about having authority. It was about using that authority with understanding and fairness. Detective Emily Parker continued supporting efforts to improve communication and awareness within the department. She believed that the strongest organizations were not those that avoided difficult conversations. They were the ones willing to have those conversations and learn from them. The review of the encounter became a reminder that growth required honesty. It required people to recognize that even good intentions could be improved through reflection and understanding. Olivia never considered the moment a victory over anyone. She saw it as an opportunity to remind people of something simple but powerful. Justice was not meant only for those with influence. It was meant for everyone. A person should not need a title, a position, or a reputation to receive dignity. The most meaningful changes often begin when people choose to see each other more clearly. The story of the woman on the sport bike became a symbol of that idea. Many people believed they understood what they saw, but the truth showed that appearances could hide incredible depth. The person they thought they were evaluating was actually someone whose entire career was dedicated to understanding others. The officer who thought he was simply handling a situation discovered a lesson about patience and perspective. The detective who reviewed the details found an opportunity to strengthen trust. And the judge who never needed to prove her importance reminded everyone that real authority does not come from recognition. It comes from the values a person carries every day. In the end, the most powerful lesson was not about a badge, a courtroom, or a motorcycle. It was about a choice every person faces. They can judge quickly based on what they see, or they can take the time to discover the truth. Because sometimes the person who appears ordinary is carrying extraordinary responsibility. And sometimes the moment people finally understand the truth is the moment they discover what justice truly means.